Welcome to our posts. Today we will see stories of r/malicious compliance. A kid on a chat told me to die, so I did. I, 22F, like to play online shooter games sometimes. Recently me and my sisters started playing Paladins since it has a surprisingly small number of edgy 12-year-olds cussing out other people for not being good enough at the game. It still happens though, and I usually respond to those guys with things like, "Isn't it past your bedtime?" or "Who asked?" and just go on with the game and then report them for harassment after the match. But not yesterday. I was playing with a team of randoms. I was trying to learn how to play a new champion, so I knew I would probably suck at first but didn't mind. And just before the game starts, someone on the chat texts, "Whoever dies first is gay." Now, I'm homoromantic asexual, so I identify with the word a lot, but I'm also a grown adult who doesn't get sad when some kid in a game starts talking nonsense. So I texted them back, "Well, I'm gay anyway." They texted, "Go die then." I was like, okay, now it's not cool. And then a devilish plan arised. I texted, "Okay," then proceeded to die repeatedly on any occasion, essentially throwing the match. The person was mad and started saying, "No, but seriously, if you die you're gay." I kept dying. Like, you did tell me to die, Timmy. Make up your mind. I know it was petty, especially for the other people on the team, but it was a casual short match, not a ranked one, and I felt real satisfaction proving this person how ridiculous their choice of insults is. Top comments. I was OMG when I read the title, but after reading the whole passage, it is okay. Hopefully the kid learnt a valuable lesson, though I highly doubt it. Next story. They wanted me to use water-based paint on metal. I did. So this happened about a month ago. So I work as an industrial painter, I paint machinery, and typically whenever I get a job they tell me what paint to use and color, but on this very day I got an atypical job in which they wanted me to use water-based paint, latex, on a carbon steel job. Now I went to my boss and told her this won't work because this paint will make it rust, but she said, "I don't care, just use the paint, they're going to be here next week." I got her to write down the paint I was to use with her signature and said sure. If you don't understand, putting water on a rustable metal is generally a bad idea, as rust ruining not only the paint job but possibly weakening the metal itself. I did my job. After a day of prep work I painted it and let it sit for a couple of days to dry and cure, and a week after that she came up to me expressing how it looks horrible as the rust was showing through the metal. I said I followed your instructions to the letter and told her again that water and air will make metal rust. After a little back and forth she conceded that she was in the wrong but asked how do we fix it. Best option: sandblast it, get all the paint off and use an oil-based paint. It was enamel, too. She got me the sand I needed and now she trusts me when I say it's not going to work, it won't work. So that's my story. Top comments. Sadly I bet the owners of the machinery ate that cost instead of the boss. Next story. Want me to take all my stuff and leave? No problem. This was a couple months ago, back in May. I had been living in an apartment with 3 other roommates, so 4 of us total, for about 8 months. We are all women in our 20s. I barely interacted with my other roommates at all, just between our jobs and classes we never saw each other. We all had our own rooms as well. For some context, on May 5th, my fiancé and I were planning to move into a new apartment together, so by the evening of the 4th I had just about all of my belongings packed up. More on that later. Though I barely interacted with my roommates, I felt like we coexisted well and we never fought or argued about anything, except for some very minor instances with Vicky and Kara. Those 2 were friends, and Vicky was definitely the messiest of the 4 of us living there. She would leave her clothes in the dryer for days, pile dishes in the sink for more than a week before cleaning them, and often forget food in the fridge until it would rot. Maybe 5 times throughout my time living there, I would get a text in our group chat from Kara saying something like, "Hey Opie, I talked to the others and they said the dishes in the sink aren't theirs, so please clean them." This was annoying, but it happened infrequently enough it wasn't awful, and I figured Vicky lied to Kara about messes since it was just easier to throw me under the bus rather than own up to it herself. On the evening of May 4th, so the night before I was planning to move out, Kara sent a very long and scathing text to our group chat. She went on and on about how she is tired of my messes, hates all my stuff strewn about the apartment, and also personally attacked me, calling me disgusting and inconsiderate. Since I was leaving literally the next day, I didn't see any reason to start a fight, so I just said it was her lucky day and I was actually moving out the next morning. She replied, "Whatever you say, just take all your stuff and leave." Now the malicious compliance. As I had mentioned earlier, I had packed most of my belongings already, but technically not everything. The four of us all moved into the apartment at about the same date, but I moved in a few days earlier than the others. This means I had bought a lot of the communal items myself. I was planning to leave these out of kindness despite them being worth $400, however, once I got that text from Kara, I decided I would in fact take all of my stuff and leave. These communal items included all trash cans in the whole apartment, $100, the Wi-Fi router, $150, a large metal shelving rack, probably the one that hurt the most, $150. The shelving rack was likely the most devastating loss for them since they had tons of stuff. For reference, the kitchen had 10 cupboards and 8 drawers, of which I used 2 cupboards and 1 drawer to store my items. The cupboards I used were also the ones above the microwave and the fridge since I am the tallest and wanted to be considerate. All the rest of the cupboards, drawers, and the entire metal rack, which had 5 large shelves, were filled to the brim with my roommate's stuff. Essentially, there was absolutely no way they'd be able to fit it in the amount of space I left behind without buying another rack or putting it on the counter and floor. I was careful to keep all their stuff from the rack organized and neat when I removed it, and everything from the rack completely covered the counters, kitchen table, and coffee table in the living room. I moved out peacefully with all my belongings the next day and have been happy in my new apartment with my fiancé. A few days after moving out, Vicky texted in the group chat that, "FYI, the Wi-Fi isn't working anymore, I wonder why," and at that point I left the chat. I've wondered how long it took Kara to realize that it actually was never me that was making messes in the apartment, but I guess I'll never know. TLDR, my roommate was very rude to me right before I was planning to move out, so I took all of the communal belongings I had planned to leave behind, trash cans, Wi-Fi router, and a storage shelf they heavily relied on. Top comments. Happened to a friend. Roommate accuses him of leaving his dishes in the sink in the group chat. He takes a picture of the mess in the sink and asks if all of it is his. Got an affirmative from his accuser. He was moving out in 2 days, so it was impossible for those to be his. He replies with an okay, washes the dishes and proceeds to pack them up too. His accuser loses his crap 3 days later. All my friend did was reply with a screenshot of his accuser saying the dishes were his. My son was sharing a place, and when he moved he took all his stuff. Roommates kept going, "Where's the toaster? Where's the cutting boards? Where's the coffee maker?" Next story. Malicious compliance with the law. This is a story from my first job as a paperboy at 13. Even at a young age I was always a bit of a nightmare to manage. As soon as there was any show of any unfair treatment, I have always made it my mission to know all the regulations and work only within them. If an employer shows no flexibility to me, they sure as hell aren't getting any back from me. On to the story. It was a great first job. My round started just round the corner from my house, and a small loop left my last delivery 3 doors down from my home. There were usually no complaints about time. I used to show up just after 7, pack my bags, and all the papers were delivered by 7:45 even on the busiest day. We had a new manager start at the shop, and apparently there were some people complaining that their papers were not delivered early enough. We were told we had to be in the shop for 6:30 going forwards. In the UK there are regulations on when a child is allowed to work, and given this new change and how it was a deterrent to my life, I started to research to see if anything could be done. I found out 2 things. Firstly, minors could not work before 7 a.m. and secondly, you could not deduct money from wages for mistakes, something that was happening regularly every time there was a customer complaint. Armed with this information, I told the manager what he was proposing, and his current way of running the deliveries was illegal and he needed to come up with a better plan. I am not sure he liked being told this by a 13-year-old, so he fired me immediately. The newsagents in question was a national chain, so I wrote to their head office detailing the situation and what I intended to do next. I stated that they were not following child labor laws and I would report to the relevant agency. I pointed out it wasn't a great look that when this was brought to their attention I was fired and nothing changed. I stated that I intended to raise a legal claim for unfair dismissal based on the nature of my dismissal. I also gave them notice of my intent to go to the press to see if they felt there was a story to a national brand ignoring child labor laws and dismissing someone who brought that to their attention. I asked for a response in 30 days or I would start to make the appropriate arrangements. Well, it took 2 weeks before I was asked to come into a meeting with my ex-branch manager and his boss. I took my dad as a witness, but he encouraged me to lead the meeting. There was some backpedaling. They stated they had made changes. We were now expecting in at 6:45 to do the sorting before going on our deliveries at 7 o'clock. They had given everyone a pay rise and a bonus which would be paid weekly if no mistakes were made. They offered me my job back. I refused. I told them while the pay situation seemed fair, they were still asking people to come in before 7 a.m. and this was against the law. I stated if they didn't want me to take this further, they needed us to be there at 7 a.m. and they could get our bags ready for delivery, or we could be there at 7 and be out for delivery at 7:15. The choice was theirs, but their interpretation of the law was wrong and I wouldn't back down on my actions unless changes were made. They agreed to my points and then, as part of my job be re-offered, there was a confidentiality clause. I stated I was not comfortable with this and if this was to buy my silence from approaching the press, there would be a cost attached to it. In the end, I got my job back, 20% raise for everyone working the same job and a weekly bonus on top. A strict 7 a.m. start time and to top it all £500 to sign the confidentiality clause. Moral of the story: make sure whoever you are trying to F over isn't a petty little crap who is willing to put more time and effort into ruining you than he is at school. Top comments. Satisfying, especially for a 13-year-old, but reporting them to the authorities and press would have been even sweeter. I hope they only made you sign and didn't ask your dad to sign, 'cause you probably can't legally sign contracts that young. Opie replies. They didn't ask my dad to sign it. Which he told me later was a mistake because it would probably make the contract unenforceable due to my age. I was pretty over the moon as a 13-year-old. I suddenly had a wedge of cash, a pay rise. The boss went out of their way to be super nice after the incident. Next story. Nobody passed the yellow line. Gotcha. It's going to sound like it's fairly reasonable to start. But trust me, it gets silly real quick. Had just started work at one of the big railway companies as a safety officer/customer service rep. Now, as you can imagine, that is basically herding sheep and not very effectively. People have places to go, but I'd rather they didn't end up dead. During probation, one of the bosses got moved to my station. Now this guy could not have fit the police description of up his boss's arse more if he tried. Looked like he spent the last 40 years dreaming of having a badge on with significance, and by God he was gonna use it. On the platform of every station there is a yellow line on the floor, few feet from the edge, to signify where not to walk lest the turbulence turns you into a train's doormat. Simple stuff, and when a train is pulling up, you're to keep everyone behind it. No issues so far, that's literally my job. Now for weeks he'd been a stickler for his way, but he would mask it as, this came from head office, but on this particular day, whatever bee was in his bonnet came out in full force and he was masking nothing. Once a train was stopped, so long as you don't have a full gaggle at the door, we usually have no issues with 1 or 2 people, you know, the London crowd who won't wait, being next to the door ready. It's efficient if nothing else. The train had stopped, 3 people were waiting for the doors to open, they did, the train left. This guy starts shouting from literally the other platform, in front of other travelers, roasting the crap of me. Safety, yes, but this was obscene. So he decided to enact a rule of his own. If you want to pass this probation, I want to see everyone behind that yellow line for a full 30 seconds before you signal to let the doors open. If a single person moves, you talk to them about safety and wait again. So let me get this straight, that 30 seconds resets for every time someone else doesn't listen and crosses the line. Did I stutter? Did you effing what? Oh, you're on, sweet child. Across that day, I was honestly looking at my watch more than I was anything else. Remember, it's for your safety after all. Plot twist. Dual line station, one into the city, one on the way to London. No way past it. If a train is delayed, nothing else moves. Cue about 2 hours later and sure enough the dweeb but manager comes charging down the platform. What the hell are all these delays for? I've got head office tearing us a new one. Just making sure we adhere to the 30 seconds, boss. I've never had so much feedback about safety. Well, the feedback I'm getting is we now have a near 10 train bottleneck at this station. Firstly, it's you have a bottleneck, not us. Second, I'm merely doing exactly as you asked. His face dropped, clearly understanding what had happened. Right then, well, you can talk to the area manager and explain this for yourself because he's going to be here in about 15 minutes. He's coming here? Ha! Deal. Did he go as white as a ghost? Yes. Did he try stopping me seeing the area manager? Yes. Was he successful? Hell no. What ensued was maybe a 20-minute conversation between me and the area manager, me finding out that this manager had been moved more than a few times for various issues. The meeting between them two lasted probably 90 seconds if that, and then a very sheepish-looking manager slowly slinked up to me and in the lowest voice ever said, "You're doing a good job. I trust you to use your judgment with the onboarding process," and then immediately scuttled away. He's moved on since, but apparently it was a personal request this time, can't think why. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share and subscribe the channel our posts.